Welcome to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. In this segment, James and I talk about sticking to your guns when you want to do something that is currently considered a little bit old-fashioned, not the way people do things, something that won't get where you want it to go in terms of having a buyer or a gallery or anybody represent your stuff and get it out into the world. Should you do it? Or should you try and just do what everybody wants? Hope you enjoy.
Pat.
Yes, James.
You've brought up, you said, hey, what about an old fashioned? And so immediately I'm thinking a little sugar, some dashes Angostura bitters, a little bourbon, maybe some rye whiskey, sugared orange peel dried, around the rim.
Woo!
That's right. So I'm thinking drink recipes for my friends who like to indulge in a beverage. An adult beverage, right? But that's not what you're talking about.
No. So I'm talking about what if what you're doing with your art, your creative pursuit, is something that is not considered current, is considered old-fashioned. For example, in writing, let's say you're telling a story. You're not writing literary fiction, so the reader isn't wowed by your sentences. You're using just normal, practical, prose. You're telling a story and you're doing most of it in exposition, like explanation and narrative summary, then this happened, rather than what agents and publishers prefer now, which is scenes. And probably readers prefer that too, maybe because of our, we're so used to watching movies and most movies unfold in scenes. So what if you just like writing that way? What if you don't see any problem with it? What if you read a lot of Jane Austen and older writers who, yes, they have scenes, but they also have a lot of narrative summary and exposition? What if you're
that far back?
Yeah, not even that far back. I mean, even the 20s, 30s. What, my God, if you look at Under the Volcano, Malcolm Lowry, which is probably from the 30s, there are paragraphs that are a page and a half long, which means there's no, and it's not tricks with layout and dialogue and stuff. It's just the person just saying this happened, then this happened.
Well, I'm reading, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah, no, go ahead.
I'm reading some books from 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
And oh man, I'm reading them because there was a recommendation, a suggestion, so I'm sticking with it. But boy, it's not like today where you're absolutely right. It's like give some dialogue, get into the story, get things moving.
Yeah, show people in action, show conflict happening in action. Have something change from the beginning of the scene to the end of the scene. That isn't usually accomplished by narrative summary. So here's the question then. What if that's how you like to write? So I work with writers, and I was talking to a writer yesterday about the opening of her novel, and it was about 8 pages of narrative summary. I had kind of talked her into making part of that a scene, so about 3 pages of it was a scene. But I had sort of said, this is setting up the inciting incident, basically the trigger that sends this character on a whole new life path happens. The conventional wisdom around writing novels is that you show the character in a way that the reader can connect with and care about, and then you make something happen. So there's exceptions, but
yeah, I mean, you have your in media res opens where it's like this big dramatic thing, which then pulls them in, and then it gives you the space to, no, absolutely.
There's different ways of doing openings, and for sure there's a lot of latitude, but I don't see very many successful manuscripts right now, ones that end up getting published with 5 to 8 pages of exposition and narrative summary as the opening, especially if it's not literary fiction.
Yeah, well, and you're not going to see those from mid-level creatives, right? Often when you see somebody's premiere novel or book, they've probably got 3, 4, 5 behind them that didn't get produced or published.
Yeah.
Right. There's also then the people who aren't mid-level, right? The people who publishers know are going to sell
Regardless.
whenever something new comes out.
Yeah.
And they get a little bit more permission from the reader to open a little bit more slowly, I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely. And who's to say that readers don't like exposition and narrative summary? I mean, I just read a Danielle
Mhm.
Steele novel I found in one of those We Free libraries, and I gotta say, the writing was absolute shit, but the story was kind of interesting. I finished it.
Yeah.
So and there was a ton of this happened and this happened and this happened and he's like this, it was breaking every rule that so-called rule that is current now, which is
Uh,
make it unput downable. I put it down a billion times, but I still picked it up once in a while and finished it. So
yeah.
what if you're not only doing that to a degree that would have been publishable 20 years ago, but you are of the opinion that publishing will change, and what now people will look back at how we start novels and go, well, shit, that was too much, that I don't know why people liked those. Like all the
Yeah.
things we say about the novels that are considered old-fashioned now, that might change. We're going to become old-fashioned. The if you want to put it this way, the mid-levels who are striving to get a big five publishing deal and are
Uh,
giving agents what they think agents want in terms of not so much what the novel's about, because you can never know what anybody else wants. It's got to come from you, but
yeah.
in how you hone the writing so that it hits those marks that are talked about in book after book on the writing craft and
Mhm.
how to get published. So if you're not interested so much, you want to get published. See, here's the dichotomy. The writer I was working with yesterday, this is her first and possibly only novel.
Right.
So she knows it's really tough. She knows it's a tough industry, and she knows that you've got to be very, very good to get published
Mhm.
traditionally, but she hasn't experienced it yet. So
Right.
there's this kind of, sure, I think good enough is good enough. Well,
Mhm.
good enough is not always good enough.
Right.
Or if your path is a high one, if you're trying to start a movie, your acting can't be good enough. It has to be superlative,
Right.
right? So,
Right.
um, it got me thinking, there's a whole nexus of things sort of circling around this, which is maybe nexus and circling don't work, but it's you want to sell this thing. So
Right.
even though you like writing a certain way and a certain style that maybe you grew up reading, and I asked her what was she reading lately, and none
Uh,
of it was novels. It was just sort of, you like to read a certain thing. Those books are out there, they're published. You don't know, you don't see
mhm.
any reason why yours couldn't be out there with them, because you don't recognize the sort of star system in publishing, and also the fact that, some of them are from 30 years ago. So there's this, how do you sell it? How do you know what people are looking for? With agents, they don't say on their websites, give me something that has 90% scenes and 10% connective tissue.
Mhm.
They never
Mhm.
say that. You got to figure
Yeah.
that out, or 80/20, whatever it
Yeah.
is. And then you mentioned earlier, let's say it's visual art. If you want to be the Picasso, the next Picasso, you got to create something new. And so
Mhm.
you can't rely on techniques that aren't in vogue anymore. But I'm saying, as a question following on that one is, what if the techniques are perfectly fine and vogue is vogue?
Mhm.
It's going to go
Right.
away.
Right.
Then how do you land on the spot where you like what you're doing it the way you want to do it, and you also want to get published? What do you
Right.
think?
Yeah, well, if you're an artist and you want to sell a lot of art and you want to sell to a general public, then as much about the creative aspect of your work, that it's also going to be, decor, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to be something that somebody wants to hang up in their home. And right now, people want to hang Picassos in their house because they're worth billions and people appreciate them now.
But don't make it a book you don't want to write. It's always got to be your book. It's always got to be your vision for the book. So I can't force anybody, I think a bad decision is giving up on what you want and trying to write for the market, because it never works. The
yeah,
market's 2 years ahead of you anyways, or 2 years behind you, however you want to look at it.
yeah, yeah.
For writing. So
But I think, the point being, I think
Yeah.
it's relevant because you have to know if you're outside of the norm,
Yeah.
have to be kind of around everybody else, maybe.
Yeah. And to be challenged, like to continue to challenge yourself to, yeah, I want to get published, but yeah, I prefer writing this way. And yeah, I need to kind of figure out, how to manage those two things. I need to be around other people who are doing their own thing.
But then, we're dealing with this question of what choices do you make?
Yeah.
And, so like I had this question that I was thinking about what will the audience let you get away with? Right.
Yeah.
And so, I frame that in terms of craft as opposed to something being obscene or not.
Yeah.
Do you want to? I mean, it's up to you. I mean, I think that's the great thing about what we do is there's all this freedom, but
Hmm.
there's freedom to do great things and there's freedom to really fuck it up.
Yeah.
And so you need to think about what will the audience let me get away with, or, fuck them. I don't
Yeah.
care. I'm
Yeah.
going to produce what I want to produce.
Yeah.
And one story, their father was an incredible artist,
Yeah.
but he refused to compromise. And he was in a very solid art scene in New York where de Kooning and all these people were, and he was going to the same little, they called them schools, but it was really somebody would sort of, had some skills and would teach them kind of thing.
Yeah.
He was in the orbit, but his life was never compromising. And he produced work that he wanted to produce, but never found an audience.
Yeah.
And, he really never really kind of had two pennies to rub together.
Yeah.
It was a very kind of live by scratch kind of life. But it
Yeah.
was a very full life too. I mean, he was really
Yeah.
one person. That was the culmination of his choices.
Yeah.
And, I can't speak to whether he, at the near the end of his life, if he felt like, oh, I missed opportunities and had regrets, or if he felt like, no, I lived my life true to my values and how I want to be. But if you want to get an agent and you want to find an audience, sometimes you have to make some compromises.
Yeah. Well, there's so I really like that story. And I think if you the fact that he kept writing or kept painting, probably painting, probably means there are few regrets because it's really somebody who refuses to compromise, to sell stuff. It's not their relationship with the marketplace that matters to them that much. It's more their relationship to whatever they're working on and to themselves, probably,
Mhm.
and not to say they're wonderful, they're better than people who also want to make money. It's just that I'm thinking that for them, success would look like, do they have a body of work that they're happy with?
Mhm.
Then probably it's okay. I'm just speculating. And then the
Mhm.
other thing is sometimes I think doing what looks to be like fucking up in 20 years turns out to be doing a great thing.
Right.
It's just that
Yeah.
your contemporaries don't see it because it's not something they're used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
I,
only a
th-
few
I think
people see it.
I think with our creative domain, there's significantly less opportunity. And again, we're talking about a body of work, right?
Yeah.
Like it's rare that just one thing gets pulled out of the,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
dust
got
of
to be a
history.
lot.
It,
Yeah.
it's like the body of work is discovered.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty rare for writing because there's just so much published
Yeah.
and the way that just trends work. And, when you commit to reading a book, it's a big commitment, right?
Yeah.
It's not committing to stand in front of a piece of art or watch a movie or
No, you're right.
see
Yeah.
a play or something. There's this French, very experimental, psychedelic, very funky as well band called Gong. And if you've never heard of them, we'll post a link to some of their music, and it's very psychedelic, and it came out in the very early 1970s, right?
Yeah.
And I am guaranteed that every time I speak to like people who are really into like just music broadly, have never heard of them. And
Right.
so it's a great band to know about because it's one you can always turn them on to it and
Yeah.
they're always going to like it, right? And but So you can discover their body of work. Now it's really easy to discover their body of work, but it's there for you to discover, right? And this happens in painting, and there's movies that I think that's like the experience of watching movies is the experience of discovering movies that were made like in the 50s or
Yeah.
whenever.
Yeah.
So, maybe that there is that time capsule like quality you can kind of create if you focus on creating a body of work that speaks with a consistent voice, maybe.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. That's it's like a particular sensibility. When I started writing, my goal, aside from winning the Booker Prize, was to write five novels that where the reader, if they didn't see the name of the writer, they wouldn't know that it was the same person who'd written them.
Hmm.
That's what I wanted.
Yeah, and I think there's value to that too.
Mm. I just
Um,
so that but the whole time capsule thing, it works with that. Feel I feel that it's things are wide open in a way that I hadn't felt before we started talking about it. Because
yeah, I kind of feel that too. Yeah.
yeah, although sorry about the rustling paper, although my client was, sort of not unwilling to try and work in scenes, it was boring. She didn't, it was
Mhm.
boring to her. That wasn't to her, not that was not where the story was. And so you got to respect that. And then the job, that I would do is, well, where do you feel the story is? Like,
Uh-huh.
which part of what's on the page feels like part of the story to you, and then that gave us a whole new insight in how to do the first 5 pages that she's going to try out. But there's
Mhm.
always this question if it's got to be the artist's decision of how to do stuff. And like you said, all you can do is say, I never know if something's a bad decision. Objectively, yes, some things are a
Right.
bad decision craft wise,
Mhm.
like I'm rooting for the person when I read their stuff. And if I don't care, I have to be very clear about that. This didn't make me care. Is there another way you can do this? Or here's some suggestions, stuff like that. But
Mhm.
I also think there's some possibility that, having the creator of the stuff really stick to their instincts and
Mhm.
find a way to make what they want to do work
Mhm.
is going to probably get
Yeah.
them either onto the mid-level if they're not there yet, or, off the mid-level onto something else.
Yeah, well, I think that's good developmental editing and writing coaching, which is saying not like there are rules to this and you're not following the rules, damn it,
Yeah.
right? And there's a lot of people who do that. They say this is how it works, and if you're not doing it, you're not doing it. I don't want to work, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the better approach is to be like, okay, if this is what you feel strongly about and this is
Mhm.
what animates you,
Yeah.
then I'm going to help you cut through the stuff that is the bullshit, the
Yeah.
the extraneous,
Yeah.
and get to that heart of what it is you want to express and you're
Yeah.
trying to do. Then now that's success,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And that's
has a
the whole
better
point.
chance of finding an audience for sure.
Yeah. And I think, maybe that's why I think having some kind of scene is more than just having like people to look at your stuff. Uh
Mhm.
I feel like there's an aspect of, maybe it comes down to just reading a lot. I think where we're getting at is we know absolutely sweet fuck all, and also that if
Yes,
you
prove that
if,
again.
if you want to do something and and it's not what people are buying, let's say, like it's, that it's clear, you've talked to professionals who say, this is not going to cut it to get an agent,
Mhm.
then you have to do it so well that it becomes its own thing that nobody
Yeah,
can really say no to because it doesn't follow
yeah,
the rules. They only say no to it because they don't actually like it and not because it
yeah.
doesn't do it well enough.
Yeah, it's like you're so driven that it's more of a spiritual practice.
Okay, that came out of left field, but
Almost.
yeah,
But you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, probably right field, but
Oh, don't get me on. Oh,
Right, left dichotomy.
are we gonna talk about the fucking batting order now?
Yeah. But yeah, that's somebody hiding in the dugout, right? I think the advice, is figure out what you are or who you are in,
Or
in
what
the,
you're
in the
doing.
context,
Yeah.
so that you can then know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Because you will, if you're trying to, cut something new, you're going to run into a lot of people who are going to say you can't do that, and
Yeah.
so you better be prepared for that.
Yeah. You can't do that. I don't want to buy that. Nobody's gonna read that.
Yeah, yeah. Nobody's going to represent that. Nobody's going to publish it. Nobody's going to accept it in their gallery. You're never going to get an audition trying to act
Yeah.
with that degree. All those kinds of things.
Yeah. Just stick to your guns and follow your gut and do it really, 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 really well. And if it takes you another 10 years to learn how to do it really well, so be it.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening to Gifted Underachievers, podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. Well, what do you think? We'd love to hear from you, so hop on over to our website at giftedunderachievers.substack.com and leave a comment. Until soon.